All right, so this show I've had kind of kicking around a little bit because it was a little ways back now that we did Wild Wild West, where Wild Wild West, the thing about it was like a weird Western, they call the genre, where it's basically a Western, but it's got, mechanical gadgets and things that wouldn't really exist at the time. Because in the case of that show, it was, the spy TV craze was happening, so they made a Wild West spy craze show. And then because it had all this futuristic stuff, it kind of was a bit of a progenitor to the steampunk genre, which is like Victorian stuff with cool gadgets and stuff. So anyway, when we watched that show, that made me remember a show from the 90s, so, 30 years later, but that I'd always been curious about, called The Adventures of Brisco County Jr. So have you ever heard of or seen this show?
Never heard of it. No, never heard of it.
Yeah, it really passed me by at the time. I knew about it because it has Bruce Campbell in it, who I think is most famous for The Evil Dead.
Yeah.
And Army of Darkness.
Yep, you know
Yeah,
him.
he's one of those guys that he's probably disproportionately famous to my generation. Like, we just love this guy. We think he's the best. We think he hung the moon. But the reality is he's in a lot of really bad crap. And I'd say the majority of his career is kind of overly camp, but I think he's extremely awesome. And apparently this is a truly good thing he was in. Here, I'll just give you I'll read you the info, because like I was saying, this is one of these shows that everyone always talks about. I always hear about it, but I'd never seen. So The Adventures of Brisco County Jr. is an American weird Western series. It ran for 27 episodes in 1993 and 94. It's set in the American West in 1893 and follows the title character, who's a Harvard-educated lawyer turned bounty hunter. And while it's ostensibly a Western, the series routinely includes elements of science fiction and steampunk. So very similar to Wild Wild West, just 30 years later. And it was created by Jeffrey Boehm and Carlton Cuse, who wrote the third Indiana Jones movie. So supposedly, the way Indiana Jones, is kind of based on those old adventure serials from way back in the day. So apparently, Brisco Jr. has a similar tone to that. So it garnered a small but dedicated following, was well received by critics, but failed to attract a substantial number of viewers, and it was a Fox show. Fox canceled the show at the end of its first and only season. And when I was reading about it, it was extremely reminiscent to that other Fox show, Firefly, which came 10 years later. Just that, one of these shows that everybody liked and the reviews were really good, but, it's a weird Western. In the case of Firefly, it's a space Western. In the case of Brisco Jr., it's a Western with gadgetry and Bruce Campbell in it. So it seems like one of those cases that it's a shame it got canceled after 1 year, but if you look at it just from like the cruel, hard numbers of a TV executive, it's hard to imagine how could a show like this really ever get a large audience, Like it might not have been the best plan in the first place, because we're talking, it's not the 50s anymore. It's not the time to make a Western, but they tried to make a Western. So that's the brief tale of Brisco Jr., but apparently it's a really good show.
And it may not be just that either. Those kind of shows, you've got to have a certain audience that's willing to kind of suspend belief and sit through the show without getting up to go off to the fridge and get your stuff and be able to pick the show up. I haven't seen this show, but if it's like Firefly, you got to watch it all the way through to get it. Because if you're roaming around doing things while the TV's on, you're going to miss most of it.
Yeah, like Firefly's big problem was that it was like Wagon Train. It was just like way too many characters. It had like 9 main characters. And I'm not sure about Brisco County Jr., but if the Wikipedia page is anything to go by, it's really long. I got that basic info, and then I was just skimming. I'm like, wow, there's a lot. So yeah, it seems complicated. And along those lines, I figured since we're still in this weird zone where I'm standing outside a hostel in Korea, so our sound quality is kind of bad. So I kind of thought maybe I should just grab a random episode, that's a normal TV length, just so it'd be a little more digestible. But it seemed like, if you take Firefly as an example, it's very important to watch the very first episode of Firefly first. which is funny because that's not how they aired them on TV. They really fucked that show. But yeah, I thought it would be a disservice to this show to just watch a random one from the middle. I think we really do need to start with the first one, which is a double episode. It's like a whole 90-minute mini movie. Yeah, so I think that's what we're going to do. We're going to watch the pilot episode of Brisco County Jr., because even though it's a lot longer than what we usually do, it just seems like if we're going to do this, I want to do it right. I don't want to later on be like, how come I never watched the first one? Why didn't I give that show a fair chance, It seems like this show is worth it. So here we go, 90-minute pilot.
Names don't sound familiar. The names I'm looking at, but the characters definitely, or the people, I've definitely seen in some of these things.
Yeah, the guy from Big Trouble Little China, James Hong, he's the only guy. I mean, I didn't remember his name till I saw it. But yeah, it's weird. It's like there's so many people that you just kind of have seen somewhere, or you vaguely know who they are. But I guess it's just because it was, a TV show, right? So they were all just people who only were TV famous and just didn't become super duper famous.
Well, that was excellent.
Yeah, I liked that show. I guess though what I find weird about it is I can see why they probably had trouble marketing it back in the day, because it's every kind of show. It's like, it's not just a Western, it's not just a comedy, it's not just action, it's not just drama, it's not just romance, it's not just futuristic science stuff, it's not just spooky voodoo mystical powers. It's literally everything in one show, which is admirable, but I think maybe not the easiest thing to sell to people,
It had a whole lot of levels too, though. It wasn't just action story. It had all kinds of like innuendo and little things hidden. Like if you watched that a second or a third time, you'd pick up more each time you watched it. Well written.
Yeah, it was kind of in that weird middle zone too, where I feel both ways about it, where I liked it and I could easily see watching more, but in a weird way, it didn't feel like a TV show. It felt like we just watched a movie, and in a way, I feel like that's also enough, right? Like, that was a very robust viewing experience. There was a lot going on in there. So I could see watching more, but I could also feel very satisfied with just that. What a weird show.
I think it would be very difficult to keep up the momentum of what we just watched. That looked like it had, yes, everything put in it. And yes, you could reintroduce those characters, but to keep up that level of anticipation and action and the innuendo and all that, that would be difficult. Maybe they could do it, but it would be tough.
Yeah, I think I will have to check out at least a couple more episodes, because if nothing else too, I'm curious about how the budget changes, because you were saying as we watched it that if there's going to be an expensive episode, it's going to be the first one. That's where they want to put all the money on the screen that they can. But especially with the train crashing at the end, going off the tracks and stuff, like I just kept thinking, like, man, it must be so much easier to just make a sitcom or something. Like, what a pain in the butt it must be to make a show this elaborate. And I would be surprised if it kept up that level of stuff. But I mean, Fox had a lot of money, so maybe.
Well, the set changes were incredible. They had so many outdoor, long-range set scenes that would have cost a fortune to produce that. That's just not some set on some Hollywood site.
But yeah, it's one of those shows, too, where I was thinking about the main guy, Bruce Campbell, how I was saying that I was a huge fan of him growing up, but I knew him mostly from the Evil Dead movies. And I was just thinking about, I mean, this is one of these things that maybe it seems like this is being too critical, but well, I was thinking about being a super duper big movie star. Obviously it's extremely hard to do. You do kind of have to be like the perfect person, you got to just be the best at everything. But I was thinking about The Rock. So The Rock from wrestling, who nowadays is a big famous actor, Bruce Campbell kind of reminds me of him in the sense that they're both pretty jacked, they're both real handsome, they're both really funny. And like Bruce Campbell's comedic timing is insane. It's so good. Like that part where he was at the dinner table with the dude while the dynamite was ticking down. and just calmly asking the guy, like, so you want to order some brunch or whatever? Like, he just has this amazing comedic timing. I was thinking, like, I was wondering why he never did become a megastar. And I think if I had to put my finger on it, the one thing Bruce Campbell's kind of lacking is he doesn't really have gravitas. You know, like when you need to be funny and you need to do a pratfall, he's amazing. But when it comes down to like, now it's serious time, now you really got to take me serious because I'm in a real battle or a real fight, that's the one thing he doesn't have. Like, you just can't really imagine him being a scary guy who could really get in a big punch up, you know? But again, it's like, it's asking so much of a person. You have to be an international superstar, you have to be the best at everything. And he just wasn't quite the best at everything. He was only the best at like 3/4 of the things.
Yeah, but sometimes I think that's people who do comedy. I think sometimes that's harder to do than serious dramatic acting, because your timing does have to be right on.
Yeah, comedy is the one thing you really can't fake. So yeah, and again, I don't know, I'm just pontificating randomly, but I did read somewhere when I was reading about this show that, his career was going up quite a bit with Evil Dead and Army of Darkness, but they were saying that this show was kind of the last time Bruce Campbell was really seriously considered as like an A-list actor. And it is just kind of weird, and it's just kind of a shame because he's so good. So yeah, I don't know, I'm just kind of casting about, trying to guess, like what was it that kept him on the B-list? But again, what's so bad about being on the B-list, you know? The B-list is still a pretty good list.
Well, and look at all those other actors that were in this show. We said, well, we've seen that guy in many, many things. We've seen that girl in many, many things, but we don't really know who they are. What is it that kept them from being A actresses? Because they're wonderful actors, all of them.
Yeah, this show was just jam-packed with recognizable people, but you just can't quite put your finger on it. Like, it's just so hard to quite tell how you know them. One thing I thought was funny too, just as far as the millions of different genres in this show, is so he was talking to the science dad, and the dad was explaining to him about the rocket, and then he had to go catch the train before it got robbed. So they strapped the rocket onto the train tracks, this gigantic cartoon-looking rocket, like the Jetsons, and he's gonna rocket across, the tracks to the train. And you said, oh yeah, I should have known. I should have guessed that's why they were talking about the rocket. But I think if there's one time you can give yourself a pass for not guessing what was going to happen, I think that's the one, because I wouldn't have guessed that in 100 years. Like, that was a truly weird thing.
Well, there had to be some reason for introducing it. God. You go back a step earlier when they're in the bar and the horse recognizes Brisco County. Oh, no, they're in the general store. He meets the little girl in the general store, and her father comes down the steps, and he's got this great big canister kind of thing, and you're in, what the hell is that man carrying that around for? Well, obviously it's to build this rocket. That's the setup. But you have no idea what the frig that thing's for.
I guess too, I was gonna say how the rocket borders on Looney Tunes, but then now that I think about it, the very first scene was literal Looney Tunes, where they drew a fake horizon on a big rock, so that the train would think that there was nothing in the way, and it drove into the rock. So yeah, this is just like it's a very unique show. I can really see why people hold such a candle for it, because yeah, it really is everything. Like, it goes well beyond the Indiana Jones thing. Like, it has that too, where it has that feeling of being an old adventure serial, but yeah, I mean, literally all the way to Looney Tunes. Like, it just has everything.
Well done. It's a good show.